I talk about AI and English learning a lot on this channel, and that's because I think it's interesting and it's always changing, so it's a very exciting area. But I want to be very clear. That does not mean traditional learning isn't just as important and useful as it always has been. In fact, there are things that you can get, for example, in a school that you cannot get elsewhere. Online learning, that's my thing. That has its place too. AI, yes, that has its place. And the thing is, you don't have to pick one and say, that's what I do. A responsible learner should do things that work. And there isn't a magic pill. And as I've been thinking about this balance, I decided to reach out to Megan Kobzej. She's the executive director of New America College. Megan works directly with adult learners, including immigrants and refugees, to help them build practical English skills, and importantly, real career skills. So it's a very interesting conversation, whether you're an educator, an English learner, or really into using AI for learning, or all of those things. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoy it. Check out the 90-day program in the link in the description. 5 courses, 90 days, help from me via WhatsApp, and responsive AI, content-aware AI throughout. All right, here's my conversation with Megan Kobzej. Enjoy. I wanted to start with a kind of baseline because my sense is that while we're in the same general industry, we, from my understanding, and please correct me, we're coming at it from two kind of different angles. I learned how to teach English in an environment where there were no rules, no
Uh-huh.
qualifications, no requirements in China.
Yeah.
The school
Yeah.
didn't know what they were doing. I was 22 and I just did whatever I wanted and figured it out. My sense is that you have a slightly more formal background. And so I'm curious if we can converge on what it means to become fluent in English, or how we could define a goal for a student of English fluency.
Yeah. So I want to say that I had a similar experience
Oh,
when I
really?
was 21, 22. It was actually in Washington, D.C. And I always say this is how old I am. I moved out to the D.C. area and I said, I feel like I want to teach English. That feels like something I just kind of want to do. So I opened up the yellow pages and looked for English language schools and called. And they were like, yeah, we're hiring. So I went in, no experience, and that's how I got my start in the industry. Yeah, and yes, we do have a very different model for multiple reasons. One of the things that we talk about with fluency, my academic manager loves to say, if you can tell a joke, if you can lie, and if you, I don't remember the third thing that he talks about, but those are the way that he says, like, um, if you can, I think if you can follow idioms, if you can use higher level vocabulary. I don't think that fluency is about um your accent, and that's the tricky part, because I think you can be totally fluent and still have a pretty heavy accent. We've had plenty of people come through like that, where their grammar is wonderful, their vocabulary is wonderful, and their accents are still heavy, but I would still consider them fluent. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. And I know you didn't ask this, but when we talk about what being a native speaker means, does native speaker include your accent? If you have fluency, if your grammar is perfect, if everything else is native like, but you have an accent, what does that mean? And that's a big discussion, I'm sure, throughout the whole industry.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too, because I have native speaker friends who grew up, whose parents were missionaries in a South American country, and there's a bit of an accent there somehow,
Yeah.
but definitely a native speaker. So I think these terms are kind of fuzzy, and the more you dive into them, the more you realize it's really hard to clearly define it.
And fluency, In what way? Do you mean, not you're asking, but fluency for work, fluency for your everyday life, fluency for university? What is your goal in fluency? You might, or you might be a fluent reader, but not a fluent speaker. So it's a very complicated question, I think.
Yeah,
And
it is. I appreciate that. The complexity is worth just leaving as complex, I think.
yeah, yeah.
But I want to ask one follow-up thing on pronunciation. You mentioned accent. So on one hand, accent reduction is a huge area for many English learners. They want to focus on accent reduction. They want to sound more natural. But at the same time, there is this whole thing where I'm okay with how I sound. I like having an accent. I don't want to put on like an American accent or a British accent and sound kind of strange. And there's an interesting tension there, I think. And what I tell people is maybe if there's any kind of pain you experience because of how you sound, people don't understand you at work, maybe you can work on it. If not, nobody cares, really.
That's what I would say too. If you don't mind, as long as you can be understood, that's the most important thing. Now, having said that, I know personally when I was much younger in college, I studied abroad in France, and I was super embarrassed by my accent. And so I did not want to practice my French because I was so embarrassed by my accent. Now, as I gotten older, I don't have that the same qualms about that. I don't care as much about that, but I think it is something that a lot of people experience. Ooh, I'm embarrassed. I'm worried they're not going to understand me. And then you just stop communicating because of that embarrassment. And it kind of makes it worse. You can't practice
Yeah.
because you're embarrassed. You're embarrassed because you can't practice.
That I think gets right to the core of what I've seen. I've been doing this for 15 years, and right at the core of, uh, at the very beginning of a journey, I can almost, I don't want to say it really too strongly, but almost predict how successful someone's going to be based not on natural ability, not on anything other than mindset. If someone is kind of fearless and isn't
Yes.
or can learn to be fearless in some ways, they're much more likely to succeed. I don't want to say that's a personality thing, but I think there is a mindset thing there that's very important.
I think that is 100% true. When students come, one of the first questions that a lot of people ask is, how long is it going to take me to learn English? And I'm sure you get that too. And it's like, that's a really big question. What do you mean by learn English? Do you mean you're going to be fluent, whatever that means to you? Do you mean that you can just communicate in your daily life? But one of the things that we always say is, so our classes are 18 hours a week, right? They're really intensive. But even at 18 hours a week, if you're only here and you only speak a little bit of English when the teacher asks you, you're not going to improve the way that you might want to. So I always say, you're going to have to work hard in class. You're going to have to study. You're going to try not to speak your own language in class. And then outside of class, you have to work too. And the people who do that, we see a lot more. I'm an introvert, but extroverts, I think, do often have an easier time learning because they just talk and they just talk to people.
Yes, I agree. That makes a lot of sense to me, but I would say the other side to that outside of class is one is communicating with people, of course, but the other, I think there's a whatever drives you, and if there's an interest-based drive and it's not, I have to
Yeah,
work outside of class, but ooh, I want to read about this and I'm going to read English Wikipedia articles instead of reading my native language. That, introverts can do that
that
too.
is true. that,
you know,
that
I
is
think that's
that
another
is
side of it
true.
is what
Yeah.
is your fuel basically, where is that
Yeah.
coming from?
I have a friend who lives in Thailand. He's lived in Thailand for 20, 25 years, and he's fluent in Thai, because one of the things he said is, I'm like a shark. If I don't talk, I'll die. So for him, it was a matter of he
I
had
like
to
that
learn.
example. That's a
It's one
really
of my
good
favorite
image. I
things.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had to learn how to communicate because he's a talker and he loves to connect with people. And I like personally, I'm not shy, but I don't really have that need. But we have, again, my academic director, he is the same. He has to talk to people, so he'll learn the language where he is.
Right. Yeah. Well, that kind of leads on to the next thing I wanted to ask. So, on one hand, you have the formal side of language learning, let's call it, which would be passing exams for getting somewhere. I want to attend this school. I need to pass this exam, or I want passing exams is a big part of, let's say, formal English learning. But then someone actually then let's say arrives here and is studying, then there
Yeah.
suddenly becomes a practical, hands-on, real-world need. And I'm wondering what the bridge is between those two things. Once they get the formal thing done, pass the TOEFL, whatever, how do you then bridge to the real-world language skills?
So I think we see this a lot. So at our school, we work with students who are on F1 international student visas. So they are, legally required to come to school. I think we have 25-30% of those who do go on to universities here. Um, and they do very well after our programs. They finished our level 6, which is a high advanced, we would say, if anybody knows what the CEFR is, the Common European Framework, that's about a C1 plus. Um, and then because they have to have that to be accepted to the universities.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of local students who are here and they have work permits, maybe they're green card holders, maybe they're citizens, just a lot of different reasons. And we see those students when they finish our level 4, which is high intermediate, that's CEFR B2, they feel that they're ready for work because they can communicate very easily at a high intermediate level. So we don't see as many of our local students staying for level 5 or 6 because they don't, a lot of them aren't going for university. They feel that
Good
at
enough
that
to get
level
by. Yeah.
4, yeah, they feel that at level 4, they're ready for work because they can communicate.
Right.
Now, we try to tell them, like, we get engineers, doctors, lawyers, all sorts of professional people. What is your goal? What kind of job do you want? Do you want a job at Walmart? Then, yeah, a level 4 is going to be great for you. You're going to be able to do that. Do you want to get back into your profession and be an engineer again? Then you're going to need that level 5, level 6, because you're going to be in a regular workplace where people are expecting you to perform at a much higher level. So we do see that gap that, when you students start to kind of plateau at a level 4, right? The level 5,
Yep.
level 6, you see the progress is a lot slower. So people feel that I need to get to work. I'm good enough.
Yeah.
I'm good enough to get a job.
Change in priorities. Yes.
Change in priorities. And let's be honest, AI translation is so much better now that for a lot of people, you need to write a professional email, you can probably use AI.
Right.
So we also aren't seeing that it's as necessary to have that super high level as it used to be.
Well, I really want to get into the AI thing because that's a really interesting part of it. But just on the point that you said there, and this is, I think, maybe a constant, not battle to fight, but a constant thing a message I always try to get out is the better you are at communicating your thoughts. Forget about career, that too, but everything in life. If you're really good at turning thoughts into words, in fact, the better you are at doing that, the more persuasive you can be, the
Yeah.
more you can move people, the more you can make people see your point of view, the more connections you can make. The better you get at those things, the more doors open. And it's hard to really get that to click with people, I think, because it's kind of a fuzzy idea, but I think it's true.
It's 100% true, and that's why when people finish level 4 B2 and I'm good to go because I can
Yeah.
get 80% of my thoughts across. Okay, but what about those 20%? the thoughts or those bigger, deeper things that that you may struggle with. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's hard to convince people, especially people who, when you talk about changing priorities, if you're here and you really, really need to work, and you can communicate pretty well, are you going to spend 18 hours a week studying? Maybe not. You might say this is good enough for me and I can get to where I need to be.
Yeah. I've been reading some literature on why kids acquire languages so well,
Oh,
and
interesting.
we think, oh, it's just brain plasticity, and that's a variable. But the interesting thing that I found is it's not just brain plasticity. It's because kids have nothing else to do. They have nothing else going on, so all of their time is language acquisition and through play, and
Yeah,
also a need to communicate basic needs. But they just don't have as many priorities as adults do,
that is very, they
competing
don't have as much
priorities.
in their head, let's be honest, right? They're not thinking
Yeah,
about the bills and the rent and the
right.
state of the world. And yeah, and play is a great way to learn, right? We know that for kids and adults, I think also learn through play, but we find here adults, we do a lot of games here, and we sometimes we call them activities because sometimes adults don't like to call them games. But we we also find that the adults that we work with, they expect to sit down and have a grammar lesson, a formal grammar lesson. And that's what they think of as learning. And we're a business as well, so we do that, even though there has been some research that shows in reality that's not the best way to learn. But I think there is something to be said. I think this is the way that I learn. I think this is how learning goes. So this is what I expect. I don't know if you've heard that from other people or from any of your students.
I've experienced that because I started teaching in China, and everyone in China learns English in school, and
Yeah,
so there's a kind of indoctrination of what English learning is, and English
yeah,
learning is academic. It is a
yeah,
subject that you study just like any other subject, and to I don't want to deprogram is not the best word to use, but
yeah,
decouple that from it's not academic. It's actually more like skiing. There is an academic element to it, but it's really a skill-based thing that is reinforced by the academic stuff rather than just being a subject, right? I think.
yeah. I kind of want to write that down. It's a skill. Like I'm gonna hold on. Let me write that down. Learning is like skiing. I'm gonna talk about that with my teachers. Because yes, it's absolutely right. You can learn, as we all know, you can learn all of the grammar in the world, but if you can't actually use it, are you really communicating? Are you really learning
Yeah.
what you need to know to get by? And that's why we do a lot of whole school activities as well. Things like we have a food festival, we do an ice cream social, games day, things like this, because we also have throughout the year students from about 60 different countries. And
Mm. Wow.
so we want to get people together to speak English to other people as well, not just the people in their class, not just the people at their same level. And we make sure to say, like, learning isn't just your grammar exercises. Learning is about other kinds of communication. And this is why we do these things, so you can have fun. And you're still learning something, and you're learning maybe about American culture, or there's something
Right.
valuable in that. We do have occasionally adults who say, I don't want to do that. What I want to do is sit and read and write and do exercises. And that's just not, I don't think there are many schools like that, standalone schools like ours.
Yeah. Well, you kind of are answering partially my next question, which is, bringing people together to do things together and communicate together, and have an opportunity to meet another non-native English speaker from a different country. That's really valuable. I was going to ask you, what is your case for the in-person traditional classroom, not necessarily structure, but setting? Because
Yeah.
a lot of things are going online, the AI thing that we'll get to, but yeah, I'm curious what's the role of the physical classroom experience?
I think that is a really good question. Now, the practical answer is that when you deal with international students in the United States, they legally have to be in person 18 hours per week as an English language student. However, when I think about outreach to local students, part-time classes, let's say, we could do those online if we got the correct accreditation. But I have resisted that because I do believe that in person has multiple benefits. And I think number one, it's very easy to get distracted when you're on a computer learning. Um, I know that from personal experience, trying to take, graduate classes online. I just immediately am like, I guess I'll check my phone. I guess I'm going to do this. When we did classes online during COVID, people were driving, it was a nightmare. And I think you just don't get that connection that you were talking about. One of our values here at school is community and connection, and you just don't get the same kind of community um, when you're online. And I know that from personal experience. You can make friends with people, I think, but going into the lunchroom here and seeing everybody sharing food, Vietnamese students sharing food with the Mexican students and sharing food with the Congolese students, and it's really heartwarming when you see that. It feels you're not going to get that online.
Yeah.
And so that sense of connection, and even let's say you can learn really well online, there are going to be some people like that, but you're going to miss all of those other cultural experiences that you wouldn't have otherwise. And it's so wonderful to see that with the students here. Like I said, 60 plus different countries throughout the year. We have people who are like, I've never met somebody from Mongolia. I've never met somebody from so and so. And we have really zero cultural conflicts here, which I think really says something about that coming together and
Yeah.
learning together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As you were saying that, I was looking at the your wall hanging there, and
Oh yeah,
it looks to me a little bit like a pie chart. And
it does actually.
well, the reason as you were talking, I was reflecting on it, and I think sometimes learners want to just go, this is what I do to learn English. Well, you don't have to choose one thing. You can
Yeah,
use AI, and you can learn at home on your computer, and you can go to and all of these things in person and online, and learning in your free time. All of these things represent a whole that if you're doing all of them in the right balance, and you dial in that balance, build your pie chart of activities, things that you do, that can be the best possible way to learn, rather
yeah.
than having to decide, having to pick something.
Yeah, and that's like the difference between, I only want to study grammar because that's the only thing that I
Yeah.
think is important versus, okay, well, community and connection is also important for you to learn, even if maybe you don't think that it is an important part of learning. So yes, let's get together with that group. We have really shy people. Sometimes people prefer to learn by themselves. As we all know, you get a group project and you have the person who doesn't do what they're supposed to do. But I think all of those are valuable learning experiences
Yeah.
in English, especially. Yeah.
And as a teacher, it's one of the things that I miss the most, because so now I am mostly making courses,
Okay.
courses that people are taking passively in their own time online. That's been my main business for a while, and the thing I miss is sitting down with colleagues, eating
Yeah.
together, talking. Sometimes I'm just in this room by myself, going, well, what am I doing?
I hated working online at home. I hated it There were two of us who would come into the office. We would be the only people here during COVID because we were just like, we need to be around people.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is the maybe the I don't want to say trickiest topic, but something that everyone has to contend with who's in this business, and learners have to be thinking about too, and that is AI. Okay, so what is your view on it today, and where do you see it going broadly? Its role in sort of English learning in general.
We talk about this a lot. It's here to stay. So we can't ignore it. We can't say you might not like it, but that's not really the point. The point is how do we deal with it, and how do we deal with the fact that honestly the students are learning how to use AI and other, in that world, they're learning a lot faster than we are. And so, we'll say, how did you do that? And they'll say something we've never heard of before, or never even thought of. So we talk a lot about, we can't fight it, right? We have to, if you can't beat it, join it. So what do we do in this situation? Right. And so again, practically as a school, we want to know what students know. So that means we don't want you to translate. We don't want you to write it in Portuguese and then translate it into English. That does not tell us what you need to know.
It's not a
And when
skill.
that happens, we'll say, what, but why did you do that? And they'll say, well, I'm worried about my grade. Okay, I really do understand that. However, we can't help you get better if we don't know what your actual level is. So, one of the things that we're trying with AI, like for example, essays, right? You can put in an essay prompt and AI will write it for you perfectly. And you can even get AI to put certain mistakes in it if you know how to do the right prompt. So instead of fighting that, I got this from a colleague. Let's use AI to our advantage and say, okay, we're going to have you go back to writing things by hand, but then we're going to have you use AI to as a writing tutor. So you give specific prompts like, you are not going to rewrite this for me. I don't want you to change any of my words. I don't want you to change anything. I want you to tell me the following. Have I made any grammar mistakes? I don't remember exactly what they are. What can you tell me what my main my topic sentence is, and do I need to rewrite it? There are certain prompts that you can give so that AI is helpful rather than just doing the work for you. And that's what we're trying to do here. That is
Sounds
tough.
like you're describing a usefulness as a diagnostic tool and a tutor rather than on the front side, which is a creation tool, which is
Yes.
a also known as an AI slop generator. Right.
Yeah.
That's there's it's
Yeah.
interesting because there's AI as a whole picture, but I think people don't separate it where they should. Is there's the slop side, which is very sloppy, even though things are getting better and better, the writing is still AI slop.
Yeah.
But then that you can, if you have a set of standards and rubrics, you can get
That's
pretty
right.
good feedback and diagnostics.
And that's what we want to do, right? Our teachers, of course, teachers are really upset about it because it's so easy to use and it's so easy for students to um, to use it because they're worried about their grades, and if you're a perfectionist, you want to be perfect.
Right.
But we need to be realistic about what's here and how are we going to use it. And I like what you said, like separating those two things, I think is a really important thing. And then what do I think about where AI is going to be in English learning? I mean, we've all heard the doom and gloom. AI is going to take over all teaching. And I, I can't see it. And maybe I'm too naive. Um, I think AI is going to take over, and it already has. You can do lesson plans. You can do great lesson plans with AI. You can do
Right.
games. You can do, teachers can do grading. Students can do a lot. But I don't think there's any way that it's going to fully take over for being a teacher. And that may be naive. That may be naive of
Well,
me.
what a
What do you
depressing
think?
world to live in
Yeah.
if that is the case. And we're all just living in these little bubbles, isolated, talking to our own AIs and not communicating and not dealing with other. I mean, aren't these things meant to help us be better in the world and communicate more effectively and have more meaningful relationships? You would think so.
You would think so. And I don't know. I also don't think that I would like to talk to just an AI. And I don't know, as the AIs get better, I may be changing my mind in a few years. I think that
Yeah.
AI is a useful tool right now. Um, but I think what you said is right. It would be really sad if it took over. Maybe that's where I'm at right
Yeah,
now.
and it's okay to have sad as one of the criteria for, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? That's a human word, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm very kind of plugged into both worlds. I'm very interested in the AI side and very interested in the language learning side. I've been doing that much longer. So I'll just can I give you where I see it going, and I would
Yes.
love your reaction.
Yeah.
So let's say in 5 years, I think in person, maybe online, but human interaction will be at the core of the learning experience. And I think it'll be a lot of applied learning. In other words, a lot of the instruction maybe will be offloaded, but a lot of the interaction in person, back and forth, doing things, building things, that kind of stuff will be the core of the human learning experience. But then underneath the surface, I think there will be an AI layer that's, privacy issues aside, either
Mm.
paying attention or recording what's going on, is aware of each individual's goals, number one, or their trajectory, and their core issues, and knows what those are today and 2 days ago and 3 days ago. When they get home and do standalone sessions, they also know that learner's interests, so they can say, hey, you want to talk about golf for a little bit, and as they do that to practice, they stitch in some of the weak areas that came out in the classroom session
Yeah.
organically, evaluate that on the back end, send that to the teacher so that the teacher knows that when they come in, is just aware of it, and that's all happening in the background. So I think AI is going to recede into the background and
Mm.
become a really useful layer for knowing where everybody's going, what the weak areas are, allowing the real experiences, the real interactions to become the center of learning. At least I hope that's what happens, but we'll see.
I love that idea. And as you were talking, I was thinking about there is already some backlash against AI, right? People are
Yeah, well,
tired
yeah.
of yeah, like chatting with an AI bot. I had a problem with Facebook the other day on my business account, and I literally couldn't get to a real person. And after about an hour of trying to chat with an AI bot, I was almost in tears because they couldn't help me and they couldn't get me to a real person. And I think that that is a real thing. We are going to get frustrated with just talking to a computer. I love that idea of having the things in the background and using it as the personalized tool, as a again a tool instead of the actual the interaction that really matters is between you and the teacher and the and your classmates. But and I know some people are already doing that. As again, as you were talking, I was thinking, oh yeah, somebody told me that in their classes they do something like I'm going to do a reading and I need you to listen and tell me exactly what I need to work on and make an individual plan for me for pronunciation. So I think there are some things that are already coming out like that that really can only get stronger.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I just hope that we maintain the balance and can remember what it's all ultimately for, which is human connection. I hope.
I hope so too. I hope so too. Yeah. I have hope. I think maybe because we do see so much connection here. Um, but we I don't know, if I were at a big university with tens of thousands of students, I may have a different point of view. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's been really interesting chatting with you. I have one last question. So, in your career thus far, is there anything that really has stuck out to you, sort of you've noticed that maybe most English learners miss, or they maybe arrive at it, but it comes very late? An insight, something that you kind of see, because often teachers have the ability to step back and look at patterns and say, I see a lot of learners doing this, but one learner will not necessarily realize that. When you're an educator,
Mm-hmm.
you can see those patterns. I'm wondering if there's anything like that. Could be mindset related, or maybe something like that.
I've been contacting alumni recently to ask for, some feedback, like what did you get from NAC? What advice would you give for other students who are thinking about studying at NAC? And one of the things that they talk about is don't be afraid to make mistakes. And one of the students in particular talked about, I was really scared to make a mistake, and that really made my progress slower because I was so worried about perfection. And I think, again, when we were talking earlier about mindset, I think that really makes a lot of sense. The students who just come in and just plow ahead no matter what, they their English may not be as perfect, but they're communicating
Mm,
easier.
yeah.
And what is communication is just getting your idea across. You don't have to be perfect, right? And we get all the time, and I don't know if you have people say this to you too, Luke, but oh, I'm sorry, my English isn't good.
Yeah, I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
well,
Everyone's better. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
if your English was perfect, you wouldn't be here. That's what we are here for. We're here to help you, right? Like we're an
Yeah.
English school. You're in the right place, friend. So,
Yeah. Right.
we give the placement test. Oh, that's a low score. Okay, but if you had 100, you wouldn't need to be here. So
Yeah.
you're okay.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, yeah, that mindset after seeing, thousands of students throughout my years here and throughout my career, um, I do think that mindset is the most important thing. I've never really thought about it like that, but I
But
think
how do
that's
you
my new
stay
thing.
sensitive to mistakes while also simultaneously not being afraid to make them? Because ultimately you do need to be sensitive to them, and it's not ideal to make, it's better to make 10 than make 100, but at the same time you have to not be afraid to make them. So how do you deal with that tension, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I mean that's a big question. That's why in class that's the time to make mistakes
Yeah.
and you can have the teacher correct you. And but again, my what I tell people honestly, if you're just communicating in an everyday setting, you're going to make mistakes, and honestly it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
If you say can I have banana versus can I have four bananas, right? I mean, if you're in a work or university setting, you are going to have to be more sensitive to that. But in your everyday life, as long as I truly believe this, as long as you can communicate what you need to communicate, who cares if you've made 100 mistakes?
Yeah, I tend to agree, and that native English speakers make mistakes all the time. If you listen to a conversation between two native speakers, it sounds like a jumbled mess of half sentences. That's just how people talk most of the time. But there's value in
Yeah,
getting up to the top of the mountain before you tumble down and speak
like
carelessly like this.
Picasso,
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Learning all the
The-
classical paintings before you can make your own thing. Yes, that
yeah,
is that is
exactly.
also true. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said a great word earlier, which is play. I think play is the right attitude because play is a very low stakes mistake making process. Like if you watch a 3-year-old play, when they make a mistake, even when you point it out, they just laugh about it and go, okay, and it's something to laugh about, notice, but not be upset about. So it's almost like a disposition toward mistakes while being sensitive. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you're right, like the low stakes thing, we try to be really chill here as well. We're academically inclined and workforce inclined, but I always say this isn't Harvard, like we're
Mm.
not we're not curing cancer here. So let's have some fun,
Yeah.
and we can do what we need to do, but we don't have to be we don't have to be so serious all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And I think that's a good point to end on. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for doing this. I really
Thank you.
appreciate all your thoughts and insights.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me. It's been really fun.